but I've got a post-COVID hair appointment. We are live right now, but we're talking about my hair. It's very important, but not as important as what's going on at the Arsenal. Welcome everybody to another edition, a special edition of the Highbury Squad. And joining me today is not my podcast sister. She's off probably making chicken and going on a ride and walks and stuff like that. But I do have Super Kevin Campbell. What's up, bro?
I'm good.
He's still buzzing.
I'm still buzzing, by the way. I'm going to buzz all summer. All summer. I'm looking forward to this one.
You cannot hold this man down for love nor money. Also joining us is Kris Carpenter from a Bergkamp Wonderland and some hipster podcast. Hello, Kris.
Hi, Sophie. You're right.
Very good. He's also a French football connoisseur, Casey. This guy knows a lot. But does he know as much as Matt? I'm not sure. But also joining us, this is our part two. Matt Spiro, welcome to the show again, and thank you for joining us. And if you don't have Matt's book, Sacre Bleu, from Zidane to Mbappe, A Football Journey, then you've missed out. Hi, Matt. Thanks for joining us again.
Hi. Yeah, no, you've got to get the book. I enjoyed Saturday. Thoroughly enjoyed Saturday. I was probably one of the few people who looked at the starting lineups and thought, oh, Kurt Zouma and Aubameyang, they know each other really well from Saint-Etienne. Is that going to work in our favour or not? And it did. And it did, because Aubameyang said he knew that Zouma would expect him to go right foot. They knew each other so well. Jinked onto his left. Learned that on the Saint-Etienne training ground.
Oh man, it was Matt, as a long-time Arsenal fan too, after a terrible season. I know this is a Saliba special, but it was a great moment. And I think we're all still buzzing because it was such a terrible season that to have something to smile and shout about. And also at the same time, make Tottenham have to qualify to get into the Europa League proper. As KC would say. Anyway, so William Saliba, let's start because we've got a lot to get through. And there's a lot of questions that have come in, which are pretty much a lot of questions that everybody has. Everybody has the same questions. Arsenal purchased him last season, sent him out to Saint-Etienne on loan, or kept him at Saint-Etienne, the club that he's grown up at. He's 19 years old. I want to start at the very beginning, though, Matt, before we kind of get to the progression of, his more adult career.
Yeah.
Who is William Saliba, firstly? Okay. And I'm not being funny. Sometimes Arsenal fans act like they know who everybody is and they've seen them play. And Kris and I were talking about Gabriel a little bit, and we'll get to him at the very end because we do want to ask you about him. But, obviously we tuned into some games as we could. Kris has been watching Liga for years. I've had to follow it because of work. KC does. But who is William Saliba? All I know really is that he was trained by Kylian Mbappe's father, and he's 6'4" and he looks like a beast.
And he took to professional football just incredibly. When he started at Saint-Etienne at the age of 17, I commentated some of his first few matches, and he really did stand out. I think he had a good guy next to him, Loic Perrin, who was the captain. So it was an interesting partnership at Saint-Etienne when he started, and we'll talk a bit more about that perhaps afterwards. But yeah, he really gave an incredible impression in the first season he broke through, which was 2018-19. But like you say, he's from Bondy, and I'm not going to plug my book all the time, but when I was writing this book, I did a lot of research on Kylian Mbappe, and I spent quite a lot of time in Bondy, at the football club as well, AS Bondy, where Wilfried Mbappe, Kylian's father, has worked for sort of 20 to 30 years as a coach and has brought through a huge number of top footballers. Obviously, Kylian, the most famous, and hopefully William Saliba will be sort of catching up with Kylian in the coming years. And by all accounts, Wilfried is an exceptional coach, and a coach who could easily have broken into professional circles, but stayed in amateur football and continues to work at sort of youth level, working with kids. So William Saliba, I think, started playing at AS Bondy when he was 6. Was obviously earmarked as a special talent. As he got older, he started growing, and he was always a big boy. And I think by the age of 13, he was already over 6 foot, and he was playing with the under 15s at Bondy already at that stage. So you know, Bondy is a place that has a really bad reputation in France. It's in the middle of the area known as Seine-Saint-Denis, which is the agglomeration of suburbs in northeast Paris. And there's been a lot of social unrest. There's higher unemployment. There's high crime in these areas. Now, Kylian, I know, was pretty lucky in terms of his upbringing because his parents are from Bondy, but they're both fairly successful professionals. They're his mum and his dad, and very grounded, intelligent people who have, you know, given Kylian and his brother and his half brother, you know, pretty much everything they wanted. Kylian went to a private school. He had flute lessons, tennis lessons. So, you know, you can say he's come from this tough area. William Saliba, I think, had it a little bit tougher. But throughout his childhood, like for so many of these kids in Bondy, football was everything. So, so what can I tell you about? You know, I can tell you that he's grown up in Paris, in surroundings that are football obsessed. Where for a lot of young children, you know, these days, of course, Mbappe is the big role model. They've had other players before. You know, the Paris suburbs have produced so many. Bondy has produced players as well in the 1990s and in the noughties. So a lot of these kids, yeah, they grow up hoping that they will make it in football, and that was certainly the case with William Saliba. Although he didn't get the breaks he wanted at the age of 13. I think he had some trials at professional clubs. Bordeaux were one of them. He was playing in midfield. He was an attacking midfielder, became a defensive midfielder. And it was when he made the switch to centre-back at the age of 13 that he just suddenly looked just absolutely awesome. So I think technically he's a good player and he uses the ball well, but perhaps he didn't stand out as a sort of creative midfielder. But as a centre-back with the size, the authority that he's got, and he has this aura, he has this natural leadership that I think and I hope will shine through from an early stage at Arsenal. So, yeah, at 13, he moved to Montfermeil, which is a suburb just next to Bondy, which also produces a huge number of footballers, has scouts crawling all over the place, and was very quickly from there picked up at Saint-Etienne and became a success very quickly there.
Wow. It's always interesting to me when players kind of play a position, but then are recognized better in a different position. And I think, you know, him coming in is huge, isn't it, Kris and Kevin? Because one of the things I'll ask you guys first before we get back to Matt on a little bit more. And by the way, Arsenal fans, I've already learned something. It's not Saliba, it's Saliba. Like you're saying S-H. S-A-H.
Yeah, we wouldn't say Saliba, or the French wouldn't say Saliba, they say Saliba.
Saliba. And so, you know, when you look at him and you see his size and everything, saying that he's a leader like at 19 as well. But KC, I'll start with you. You know, when a player changes position and then he kind of molds into something else, you've been around the game for so long and you've probably seen that. What's your early take on kind of the younger Saliba and kind of what Matt's talking about in terms of his journey?
I love the explanation by Matt, because it sounds very similar to something where I came from. Michael Thomas, Rocastle, Davis, Ian Wright, you know, Brixton and Stockwell and, you know, Deptford and all those, Lewisham, all that area is deprived. It's like you mentioned Bondy. Football or sport is the only way really how these kids could actually get out. So you tend to find these kids, load of kids go and play football to try and help themselves, to try and elevate themselves out of the ghetto, so to speak. So I love that explanation. We've seen it happen many a time. The fact that William played in midfield and as an attacking midfielder, for me, is brilliant. I'll tell you why. Because even though he's a big lad, it didn't quite work out there, because you have to have different traits when you play a bit further forward. As he moves backward, the game is in front of him now. He can see everything, he could read everything. He's big, he's strong, he's quick. Things move a lot slower when you're at the back, and you could see things quick. If you could read the game from midfield, when you're at the back, that's why you used to see players always move their way backwards. You never see a player move his way forwards because the game's quicker there. He's moving backwards, and he now can see the game. He's big, he's strong, he's imposing. He could use his body on strikers, and I think it's a fantastic move for him. And
we've seen with Sophie. Sorry, Kev. I was going to say. I mean, Kris will tell us more as well. But we've seen that at Saint-Etienne, that he doesn't hesitate to step forward with the ball into midfield. And the cup semi-final was interesting against Rennes this season. He conceded a penalty. I don't think he's the next David Luiz, but he conceded a penalty. He was turned and just put his foot in there, and that was really early in the game. And I think it shows his character as well, that he grew and he became so influential in that game that he was the man of the match. He effectively set up the winning goal in the last minute by stepping through the midfield, breaking a couple of challenges, played a ball to the edge of the box. It broke to Boudebouz, who turned and scored in the last minute. And yeah, I mean, that's what I was going to say in terms of his past. And he's comfortable on the ball, and when he does step up into midfield, he doesn't panic. He knows what to do.
That's great.
And Matt, sorry, I just want to finish this last point.
Yeah, no, keep going, guys.
Because I think it's really important. There's talk of William being a leader. Now, we've seen young leadership at Arsenal. We've seen a young leader who's got a statue outside the stadium, Tony Adams. As a young man, was a leader. We've got another one at the club who leads by example in Kieran Tierney right now. How good would it be to have Tierney and William Saliba in the same back four or the same defense? Because that's what we need. There's a cry for leadership at Arsenal Football Club. I know David Luiz is a leader and probably is much maligned because his form goes up and down depending on how we play, whether it's a 4 or a 3. But having another young leader is important. Sorry.
And also, KC, to tack on from that, I remember Gerrard and Terry were made captains of 2 mega football teams when they were very, very young. If you're young enough and you're good enough, you're ready. And especially if you've got leadership material. Kris, one of the curious questions I have for you is, I know, like you watch Liga religiously. Did you know of him before we signed him? Was he one of those where you were like, gosh, I hope this guy becomes an Arsenal player one day?
The fashionable answer would be to say yes. I followed him since he was 7, and I used to chew bread for his duck. But no. I mean, a little bit. I'd seen a few bits and pieces. I'm not going to lie and say I've watched his every game. But he's one of those players that Matt might well agree. The comparison has gone out a lot recently about the sort of the next Raphael Varane, and I think that's a little bit. It's a little bit quite a lot too soon, shall we say? And I'm not saying it won't be, but it's an awful lot of pressure on the young man. But the comparison kind of rings true in that I remember when Varane first came through at Lens, and when you did see him, whether it was 1 game, 2 games, 3 games, 4, whatever it was. He would always leave an impression on you. And you just, sometimes you watch a football match and you just see a player and you think, there's something in that guy. There's something there. I'm going to keep a little close eye on him. Camavinga is another one in France last year. You only had to watch him 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and you'd see the player was there. And it was the same with Saliba. And when he came in, Matt mentioned that the partnership that he had with Loic Perrin when he was fit, obviously, the 2 ends of the spectrum. Perrin's just recently announced his retirement. But you could sort of see, under the guidance of an older, experienced player, that although, yes, he was willing to try things, he was learning with every game. And he's fearless. And that's something else that you don't always get in young players. You do get players that, particularly forward players at a sort of youth level, they'll take chances and try things. Defensive players, not so much, tend to play it quite simple and do the easy things. William isn't really like that. He's very much an expression player. I really like the fact that, touching on the leadership, he is quite a loud presence, and in this sort of world of quiet or atmosphere-less stadiums as we're going to get, I think quite a lot of people are going to be quite surprised that you're going to hear quite a lot of him. He's quite a big presence, and a lot of people sort of saw the footage at post-cup final and said, oh, he's a bit shy. And the reason he was a bit shy in those videos that leaked out was because Lacazette was taking the mick out of his club, Saint-Etienne. So I wouldn't read too much into that. He's a big personality, and it's one of those players that I wouldn't have sat here and said, oh, I really hope Arsenal sign him. But when the rumours come out that we were looking at him, I thought, based upon what I've seen, I can see why they've gone big, and you can see why Real Madrid were looking based upon the fact they already had Varane.
Yeah,
I think Chris, I was going to say, I think the sorry, I keep butting in, but I think the Varane comparisons were my fault, because I remember in his first season when he broke through, we did a little piece on the Ligue 1 show, and there was in that, I think the new Varane was the headline on that or whatever, and that got a bit of traction on Twitter. So that's my fault, and my fault. I think we've got to be wary, like you say, of building this guy up too much and expecting this, the new Tony Adams or the new Rafael Varane to step onto the pitch. But I also think, and I was actually hesitating about asking Kev about Tony Adams and the leadership that he had sort of naturally in him, because I don't want to make those comparisons and make it suddenly like we're expecting the new Tony Adams. But I actually think Arsenal fans today, and we just saw a comment that came up there, I think it was Don Juan who wrote, "Give him a year to adjust in the Premier League and he'll be okay." I think Arsenal fans are very much ready to get on board with this guy and to give it. And I think if he makes a couple of mistakes early on, people are not going to get on his back. I think fans now, they know the position Arsenal are in. They know there's a rebuilding job to be done, and this guy could be a cornerstone of it. So I'm quite encouraged, in terms of that. My fears that we're building him up only to be disappointed.
Right, Matt. And that's a great point, which brings me on to my next question before we kind of get your take on his overall season at Saint-Etienne. KC, are we putting too much pressure on this kid? We have a tendency to do that when we're super excited about someone. And I fear that we're expecting him to come in and be the superhero. He's 19 years old. He seems to be able to soak up the pressure well, but are we, as fans, putting too much pressure and emphasis? Because even during the season, when we were falling and failing at the back, every single fan said, let's just get Saliba back. Let's just get Saliba back. What's your take on putting too much pressure on him at this point, unless, he's the kind of player that soaks it up?
Sophie, I'll be honest with you. I don't think they're putting too much pressure. I just think that Arsenal want a back four that they're used to, that they could rely on. I think that's really the important part. Anybody I speak to, they still talk about getting another centre back in. So it's not just, they understand William Saliba's a young man. They understand he's going to take a bit of time to adjust. And if it doesn't take time to adjust, even better. But I think they understand that it might take him a little while, because he's a young man. He's big, he's imposing, but it's the Premier League. And, it's a better league than France. But everybody I speak to, everybody talks about getting another centre-half to play alongside him, because they know David Luiz might do a job for a bit, but there has to be a different partnership there. Whether Pablo Mari's the answer, I don't know. But
that's the biggest question from every Arsenal fan, which we're going to get to before a little later. But what I want to just tackle here real quick is I want Matt to give us a quick overview on his season at Saint-Etienne. You mentioned, obviously, the Coupe de France, him not playing in the final as well. Has he walked away from that not feeling bitter? Is he okay with that? And just give us like a little, bird's eye view of what his season was like. And when you look at the talent in Liga, and obviously PSG are the team that everybody looks at, but, he's played alongside some really good players at Saint-Etienne as well. Matt, what's your take on his season?
No, I think it's Kevin's right. It's obviously it's not the Premier League. It's not the same league, but I think it's a great league for young players to get their grounding because they get their chance at a young age. And it's more physical, I think, than a lot of people in England realise. There's not the same sort of intensity, but anyway, yeah. But it's not easy.
People poo-poo? Because everybody compares the Premier League to Bundesliga, but they don't get it, do they? They really don't. It's not an inferior league from a monetary perspective, perhaps. Yes, from a global audience perspective, but in terms of the quality, I mean, the quality in the Premier League was not great this season either. So sorry.
I think I saw a list of the 100 greatest ever players in the Premier League, and I counted. I think there are 25 that went to the Premier League from Ligue 1. That are the greatest ever players in the Premier League, and that says a lot about the quality you have here. And I think the big problem. We're moving off the subject, maybe. The big problem in England as well is I think there's a lot of talented players, particularly talented young players coming through, but they're not getting the chance. People rave about is it Curtis Jones at Liverpool? This young lad, 19 years of age, and he played 5 sort of ends of matches this season. If he was in France, he would have played 100 league matches already. And these
Phil
guys,
Foden would probably have 200 appearances already.
Yeah. So I mean that's a big problem. I mean, Saliba's season was disrupted by injuries significantly, and that's obviously something that's going to make Arsenal fans a little bit worried or wary. He had a groin injury at the start of the season, came back I think in September time and was very impressive, and Saint-Etienne suddenly stopped conceding goals and he made a big difference. Then he broke a bone or fractured a bone in his metatarsal, 5th metatarsal I think, which is a really annoying injury because it takes so long. You can't play for a long time, so that was frustrating for him. He only played sort of half the games that we would have been hoping for and Saint-Etienne would have been hoping for. I think as well, what you said about the Coupe de France final, missing that final, it definitely disappointed him a huge amount. I got a lot of flack on Twitter for saying this is a really bad situation, a bad way for Arsenal to start a relationship with a guy that they're banking on, that they need to come good. Now, I wasn't blaming Arsenal because it was complex, the negotiations between Saint-Etienne and Arsenal. There was this £2.5 million bonus that Arsenal was supposed to pay if he played his 17th game. But my understanding of the situation was that Saint-Etienne, I think the finances would have been fine. They found an agreement there. It was the fact that Arsenal insisted on William Saliba being in London for tests the week of the final, for tests I think that would have lasted 3 days. And Saint-Etienne said, no, we need him. We're preparing for the final. We need our players there. So I think that's a great shame. I understand that Arsenal want to be super careful that he would have been physically, totally ready for that cup final. But yeah, I think he would have been absolutely gutted. He insisted on making the trip to the Stade de France, which I think reflects on, again, the person that he is, because he wanted to be there to support the team and to say goodbye in a proper way. And I think that, that showed as well in the way that he played with Saint-Etienne this season, because he was only on loan at Saint-Etienne, but he gave absolutely everything. And he was there leading the celebrations. He didn't look like a player who was just kind of trying to stay fit and get a bit of match practice. So I think
Matt, was it? Am I right in saying that because of the lockdown, the final was after the loan had kind of finished?
Yeah,
wasn't it? So he was technically an Arsenal player, but obviously Arsenal would have to do them a favour to let him play in the final, kind of thing.
Yeah. No, you're right, Kev. No, you're right. Yeah. You're right. I defend my French boys. I think it's a great, you've got to realise as well, people don't, but Saint-Etienne, they're not a big club these days, but they're one of the biggest clubs historically in France. They've won the league title more than any other club in France. This was their first cup final. Kris will correct me if I'm wrong. Was that since 82 or 84? 82, I think.
Definitely early 80s.
This was their biggest match in decades. Mm-hmm. And they're the club that gave Saliba the chance. It was a chance to play against Neymar and Mbappe in the cup final. But you're right. But Kev, if I said to you, or I said to Arsenal fans, so I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit, the FA Cup final got pushed back to August the 1st. If Real Madrid's loan of Ceballos ended at the end of July, and Real Madrid said, okay, we might let you have him, but you've got to come back to Madrid. He's got to be in Madrid for tests for 3 days before the cup final. I'm not sure Arteta would have been happy about that.
Yeah, but you see, this is the problem, Matt. You run the risk. Of not having the player for the final. So as a club, you've got to make a decision. It's either, listen, you go there, take your time with the tests, William. Don't mess up, don't go full out on the test. Just do the test and come back. Can we send him there on a Monday and he could come back on the Wednesday, please? Because he's not your player. You've got the money and he's not your player. So Ceballos would have been in Madrid. I would have took him there myself, Matt, and then I brought him back. I'm telling you now, because
driven in the Campbell truck.
if the game, the VW Beetle van, he would have been in there. Come on, off we go. Hovercraft, not even hovercraft anymore. Not on the hovercraft that got over.
Do they still exist?
No, but I'm saying we would have made one, a hovercraft.
Right, I love it. Chris,
I think, Sophie, sorry, just to finish on that,
I
think he's fine. Of course, he was bitterly disappointed. I don't think he's going to hold it.
I would be bitterly disappointed. Yeah. I mean, come on, it's like he grew up in with that club. I mean, of course, he's young. He's 19. I think we forget. I mean, when I started off my career in the entertainment industry, I would have been disappointed if I wasn't invited to a premiere. I remember being really upset that I didn't get to go to Scotland for a Braveheart event. And I was really crushed by that. You know, I was young. I was trying to prove myself. I mean,
but I love seeing him at Wembley and see, him experiencing the intensity of that game, seeing Arsenal win a cup. Yes. It's a great game. The fans weren't there, because if the fans would have been there, it would have been, even more
magical. And even though he didn't get to play in the Coupe de France, he got to experience what maybe he'll be able to do with Arsenal next season. And you're right, man, that was wonderful. Now let's talk about his skill set a little bit, because I think this is the key, Kris, for Arsenal fans. We've been so woeful in defence. The biggest question that's come from everybody, and we can float to that after we've talked about his attributes, is who's going to be his best partner. But how can we figure that out if we don't know the player? And a lot of fans aren't educated enough to understand what Saliba's best attributes are. We know he's 6'4". Is he fast? Is he great in the air? Positionally, is he like a Mertesacker? Does he have that nuance about him? Does he come out? Matt said he comes out great with the ball. What have you seen as a fan watching this season, Liga, his best attributes?
Yeah, well, firstly, good knowledge, by the way. Matt 82 was the last. Good knowledge, that man. Yeah, I mean, but based upon, again, what I've seen, the worst thing you can do in the modern era is go on YouTube and watch, because you'll get lots of people who put together the very best compilation videos of the very best moments, and I don't think that gives you a proper look at a player. So I kind of took the time to have a look through some longer highlights, shall we say, and particularly when he was still playing. The first question people always ask you, is he quick? Because in the modern game, it's all about pace, it's speed, it's sharpness. And what I would say is, when you think of quick players, you don't always need to think of actual raw speed. Patrick Vieira was very quick. Why was he very quick? Because of his stride. He covered ground. And I think that's probably more what you're going to see in Saliba in terms of out and out pace. He's not going to roar back at 100 miles an hour. And being 6'4", there is quite a frame to carry. That said, he's certainly not slow. He's not your sort of your John Terry or your Harry Maguire type of centre. Although Harry Maguire is actually fairly quick for his size, in fairness to him, but he's still awful. He's a player who's got a good stride, and because he reads the game so well, he's one of those players that, do you know, when I sort of say a player glides, that's kind of how he reminds me. He's one of those players that never seems to be sort of charging around like a headless chicken. He picks up speed over a period of the space he runs into. And as Matt alluded to earlier on, his reading of the game is very good. So yes, he will get caught out positionally, and sometimes he'll try and bring the ball that little bit too far. That's the benefit of youth. In terms of in the air, I think it's an area he can work on, just in terms of his distribution out of the back from in the air. He's very good at headed clearances. But again, I think nowadays, and particularly under Arteta, a lot of the work is going to be on the ground. So if he is going to be heading clearances away, I think he's going to have to kind of get on board with the idea that the header's going to need to go to places rather than just sort of up and out like the old school days. But his distribution on the ground, I don't have any concerns about at all. He's one of those players that, again, when he distributes a pass, there's a good follow through. There's a good. He finds good angles as well. He's not a sort of. You see a lot of centre backs just playing balls into areas. Even David Luiz, for all his qualities as a ball playing centre back, if you will, sometimes he just hits an area. The thing I like with Saliba is he generally will tend to find a player and looks to his wide players from fullback. And I think that's the only other thing that you're going to have to, in terms of his best partner. It really depends on what system Arteta plays, because if he plays three at the back, that's very different to a back four. If it's a back four, I really hope that I may regret saying this, but I hope it is David Luiz, because I want experience next to him. I don't, God love Shkodran Mustafi, but we know he's got a couple of ricks in him. And I'm not saying David Luiz hasn't, but Luiz is a bit more of a vocal leader and has done it at the top level and has won it at the top level. And Shkodran Mustafi is part of that Germany winning World Cup side, of course. We won't forget that. But I think I'd rather have Luiz's experience across leagues and that ability to almost coach players through games. So I would hope it's David Luiz. If we're going with 3 centre backs, then to be honest, I wouldn't have any concerns about him playing with any of our back line.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, if we touch on it in a bit, if we bring in another centre back, that it might be a complete revamp. But he's a player that I think will. It's almost a good time to come in to this Arsenal side because A, it's on the up, but B, some of our defensive capabilities over the past 3 to 5 to 7 years haven't been the best, shall we say? So if you come in and you make an impression, again, I don't want to pick on Skodran, but 6 months ago, Arsenal fans would have told you he was the worst defender ever known to man. He came back, had a pretty decent return. I wouldn't say he did anything spectacular, and we were all gutted he couldn't play in the cup final. So that sort of gives you an idea of the levels we are at the moment. So I think he'll come in and go straight in the side, to be honest. That's what I anticipate anyway.
Right. And KC, we mentioned this on the Highbury squad a couple of days ago because we were talking about, how Arteta might want to emulate what's going on at City and what Pep did at City, playing to the strengths. And obviously he trusts David Luiz in his experience and he wants to maybe make David Luiz, I'm not going to say the nucleus of the defense, but play to his strengths because he does trust him. KC, how do you see and who is going to be Saliba's best partner, do you think, based on what we know Arteta might want to do?
On what we know now, Kris is right. It will be David Luiz. David Luiz has got all the experience in the world. Let's be honest. I say David Luiz is better in a back 3 and not in a back 4, but he's never had the right partner. If we're honest, he's had Socrates beside him and at times Rob Holding, Mustafi beside him. He's not had a big, dominant, fast reader of the game who can cover the ground, who can mop up some of David Luiz's mistakes. Because even at Chelsea, he made mistakes, but there were players around who can mop his mistakes up. So maybe that one is the best one for him right now. Would I like another centre-half in? Probably. Amari, obviously, has been injured. He looks a decent player, not as quick, but that could be because of the balance. He's a left footer and Saliba's a right footer. That could be a good balance because they're both decent on the ball. Maybe that could be a opportunity. But right now, I'd say David Luiz for experience.
Matt, what would you say, having followed him, also kind of being an Arsenal guy as well? What do you think, knowing what we know? And I do want to talk. I do want to ask you: is this the time, Kris, for us to ask about Gabriel? Because I don't know, we don't quite know. There's so much talk again for us about the Coutinhos and the Villans and more offensive players. Yet there's no real hype or talk about bringing in another defensive player. And maybe the Gabriel chess piece KC and I were talking about before we came on air is that. A little kind of ticket for Manchester United to sign him because they've been interested in him for a fair bit. What do you see, Matt? How do you see him? Because we want to set him up for success. We don't want to set him up to fail. And a lot of the times we've set our defenders up to fail only because we just haven't had the talent to support some of the better players or the system around them.
Well, I think we've got a lot of centre-backs. That's the thing. So it might be a case of how many the club think they can move on as to whether we get another one, a Gabriel or another centre-back in. Because actually, in terms of numbers, I know Mavropanos is gone out on loan, but in terms of who I wouldn't like to see sort of partner, it's easier to look at it like that. Who I wouldn't particularly want Saliba to partner, I'd say Mustafi and Socrates, because I think he'd be better off alongside a player who is steady, reads the game very well, and Saliba is quite athletic. As Kris said, I think his speed is good over long. He's a big guy. So over sort of 5 yards, he may not be, the sharpest, but he's quick. If he's got to track back or cover from a David Luiz mistake, 10, 20 yards, he's quick and he'll catch up. And I think he'll enable Arsenal to play quite high up the pitch. So I think I'd go with the same as Kevin and Kris. I'd say David Luiz should play alongside Saliba because of his experience, and I think it would help him. But likewise, I'm not confident of Luiz playing in a back 4. I think he's much better in with three centre backs. I was talking to a Saint-Etienne supporter who's a colleague of mine. I don't want to get back to Saint-Etienne, but we were talking about it today, and we concluded that we just play Saliba, Tierney, and sort of 8 attackers or something, and then we'll be all right. But no, I looking ahead, I think probably I'd say ideally Pablo Mari, if he is good enough. We don't quite know yet, and I'm a bit concerned. He looked slow, didn't he? But in terms of his attributes and Saliba's attributes, I think they'd complement each other very well. So if he's good enough, perhaps the longer term partnership is that.
And you would think that also because, I mean, I think Murray's more of an elegant defender, isn't he? He's more of a thinking defender versus a defender with pace. He's going to be the type of defender where you think he's never going to get there, but somehow he's there positionally. And Arteta must have known something of his history at Manchester City. But one of the things I think that was interesting, and I'd love to know this from you, Matt, too, and, we talk about this a lot on our pod, is there was a time, KC, where we were early in the season where things were really bad, where we were thinking these players are uncoachable. I mean, it felt that way, didn't it? That there was nothing that could resurrect these players. And the training video that we saw the other day, Mikel Arteta is super intense, and we just all love that about him. And there was this moment where he was talking to Saliba about how to receive the ball. And I just want to know, at 19 years old, he doesn't seem arrogant. He seems like he's ready to soak all of that information up and soak
all of that up. He's a sponge, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a sponge. And to me, I like that moment because, some headlines try to make something out of it. But to me, he seems like the type of player who's ready to accept it all and mold and be molded into the role that Arteta wants him to be molded in, KC.
Yeah, look, I think Mikel Arteta he's got one of the best up and coming centre backs, young centre backs are in Europe. Real Madrid don't covet this guy if he's not a proper talent. We know there's going to be growing pains. There's going to be learning that he has to do. But Mikel Arteta has inherited this guy. Now he can get his hands on him and he could start molding him, because when you're a young player, we'd love to know it all, but we don't. Just like when you're a young journalist or a young whatever, you think you know, but you don't know it all. And to learn from somebody like Mikel Arteta is going to be such a good thing for William Saliba, because Arteta's vision of the game, we've seen him make players who were poor. They were poor before he come to the club. They've improved. How has he done it? He's won the men over. So you get a talent like this young man. And remember, it's not just about now. This is 3, 4 seasons where he's going to be developing. So if you can get the fundamentals and the basics into him now, he is going to absolutely flourish in the Premier League. And that's what Mikel Arteta's doing. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity to mold a top young defender.
And obviously we've all seen the difference, right, Kris, in Arteta's coaching, his man management, the way he's put his arm around a lot of players. But you had a burning question, and it's kind of part and morphs itself into the whole Saliba special here, and that is who, other than what we have, for example, who can come in and maybe even elevate his game. Like we don't have to just settle for David Luiz, right? And I know we have redundancies and all sorts of things, but it's clear that the team are trying to nickel and dime their way into making this team better, guys. So the question is on the screen. There's been a lot of talk about Gabriel, and I'll start with you, Kris. You were asking that question too, and you had tweeted about it. I don't know if it's realistic or not. I don't know if we're in the game, but it seems to me that we don't just have to settle for what we have. We should set this kid up to make sure that he's got all of the supporting cast and the right players around him. Yeah,
I agree. We were talking about earlier on about comparisons, and Matt's Matt announcing that he's the new Raphael Varane. So just to remind everybody, when he becomes that, Matt said it first, and if he fails, it's all Matt's fault. This thing that slightly concerns me about the players that were being linked to sort of play around him. The other comparison that I had in terms of Saliba breaking through and making an impact was Rio Ferdinand. And when he first came through at West Ham, he was such a unique defender in his sort of running style, in his play style, in the fact that he wanted to get on the ball, he wanted to play. He was one of the first to come through that modern day school of defending, if you like, and that ability to bring the ball out. Sadly, his punditry not quite so good. But that's the only thing that sort of slightly worries me, because we haven't got what I would call a Nemanja Vidic style player who can be playing alongside him other than David Luiz. And as I say, with David Luiz, you are going to get those games where you look at him and you think, absolutely, this guy's brilliant. And then other days you're just going to think, oh, crikey, what's going on here? And when you look behind that, as we say, we don't know enough about Pablo Murray yet. I'm led to believe he's impressed a lot of people since he's come in, which is great. But I might be impressive on one day in training. Doesn't mean I'm a Premier League defender. Mustafi, we don't know. I think the club will probably retain his services, not least because he's injured. So I don't think you can really sell him on at the moment. With the idea that we're probably going to lose 2, maybe even 3 centre backs, I'm not sure Rob Holding has a future at the moment, based upon his form. Callum Chambers is another one that people have forgotten about, and Socrates, he may well stick around, but he's not going to play under Arteta, and that's why I'm slightly confused by the whole Gabriel link, in terms of the fact he's also left-footed, in terms of the fact that he's had one very good season at Lille, and it was a very good season. Played 24 games in Ligue 1, and he was very good. But I just sort of worry that at 22, are you kind of not throwing defenders under the bus? But if you play Tierney as well, it's a very young central defence and a very young basis to build around. And that's where I found that slightly odd link, unless they are just looking at getting in a talent because the opportunity is there to do it. What I'm led to believe is that there have been some discussions, but they're very preliminary. I know there's a few French outlets reported that the talks were at advanced stage and bids were accepted. That's not what I've heard. And again, you can only trust people's opinions, but that's not what I'm led to believe. So I think it's a case that we're just testing the water around centre backs and sort of that, if we were to do this, would you do that kind of situation? And in terms of the question that was asked there, when you compare Malang Sarr, who's the other one that the question has come in about, I actually really like him because he's different to what we have. He's big, he's physical, he's strong, he's a bit more of a tank, and we don't really have too many of those players. But then I look at it on the flip side and I go, is that an Arteta player? I'm not so sure. And Man City, they had, for all his faults, Vincent Kompany, he was a very good defender, but he had a rick in him. People forget he wasn't flawless, but he was a leader. He was big and strong, and he was powerful, and he commanded that defense. And he brought through Laporte, for example, to the player he is now. Now they're playing Fernandinho back there. We don't really have that, and that's the bit that worries me. And the Gabriel link, he's a very talented centre back, and Brazilian, at say 22 years of age, he's got a big future ahead of him. But this is on the back of one good season at Lille, and the sort of money I think we'd have to pay for him seems to be a bit over.
That's what I was going to say, Chris. I mean, what sort of money? They're talking sort of 30 million euros, between 20 and 30. I mean, it's
yeah. I don't think Lille will go under 40, to be honest, Matt. They're talking about Renato Sanchez being worth 70. I mean,
they've just sorry, Sophie. They've just got 80 million for Osimhen. I mean, they're not under pressure to sell.
No. Why
so Matt, how did I think Chris brings up some good points?
Is Sarr on a free? Sarr's free,
yeah. Or available free.
But how old is Sarr?
Yeah, he's available.
How old is he?
23, I want to say.
23.
I remember he started at 17 at Nice. Matt,
what's your take on Sarr, Gabriel? Kind of circling around to the question, then Chris brings up some really good points in terms of the comparisons to some of the City players, especially as well. From Sarr to Gabriel to, Manchester United here, Thiago Silva's always been, I would have liked to have bought him 10 years ago, not now. Talk us through we said who could he partner with now based on what we have, But how many of these options are really realistic for the Arsenal in terms of some of these?
The main difference I'd say between Malang Sarr and Gabriel at the moment is that Malang Sarr had a pretty ropey season at Nice. He was played out of position he was played at left back quite a lot by Vieira. Vieira had various problems with his squad, is a bit unbalanced, and Nice, I think they've already made 6 signings this summer. They're trying to redress all those issues. But he's a kid. He was like living his dream. He broke into the Nice team at 17. He's from Nice, and he's a good player with leadership potential as well, but whose development went very quickly at the beginning. But he's been a bit error prone this season and played out position. Gabriel's been really solid. He's not necessarily a guy who will stand out, but that's probably a good thing for a centre back. You don't notice him in matches because he's neat and tidy. He wins the ball in the air and uses the ball quite simply, but uses it quite well. And I'd say potentially with Saliba, those two. Kris made the point, they're both very young. In the future they could be a good partnership. But I think to put 30 million or even 40 million on Gabriel at the moment, given the money that Arsenal have, which is obviously quite limited, I'd be surprised. I know there was a French outlet that said that Arsenal have moved ahead and are favourites to sign him. I'm not sure that's the case at all. I'm not sure how interested we are in him.
KC, what makes we're always talking about the youth at Arsenal, and we do have a lot of it, and we keep a lot. What I've heard a lot of in the last few weeks is that Nketiah maybe isn't good enough, and is Willock good enough? And obviously we all are very excited about Saka. I'm a bit scared about Martinelli's been injured, and he feels like he's kind of in a dark room right now, and I just don't want everyone to forget about him either. Why is it someone like Saliba at 19 is ready to come in and be a leader, and we're afraid to maybe pull the trigger on some of the other players that aren't named Saka or and I'm not sold on Arteta being sold on Martinelli yet, because he wasn't really picking him before the injury. What's your take on that, on the age thing and kind of looking at players and why one might be ready versus the other?
Well, I think experience counts. Playing games absolutely counts. Now, William Saliba this was his 2nd season really in the first team at Saint-Etienne. Got bought. Part of the deal to sign him was that he comes back. Saint-Etienne wouldn't sell him for that money without that being a part of the contract. He comes back for another season, and he was only 18, 19 at the time. He's 19 now, so he's 18 to 19, which another season playing. I know he had a few injuries, but he still, when he got fit, he got in the team, he made a difference. That counts. Unfortunately, these Arsenal players have been in and out of the team, and they've been dropped aside, and that's what tends to happen in England. We've seen even the most heralded youngsters in the country, like your Phil Fodens and all these guys, not play regular football. Now that's gonna hinder them. So the likes of the Willocks and Eddie Nketiahs and Reece Nelsons and all these guys, and Willock, you're gonna get that question, and you're gonna get Mikel Arteta coming in. Martinelli's got double figures in goals. He's got more than Lacazette, but Mikel Arteta isn't sold. He has to see you on that training pitch, and he has to work with you to know how good you are. He's not just going to go on the past. He is not going to go on that.
But is it, Matt? Is it guaranteed? And Arteta is definitely the most ruthless manager we've had since George Graham. There's no doubt about that. Is he guaranteed to start? No, I don't think so. I think he'll have to prove himself, and he'll have to earn his first team place for sure. And I think he understands that. I don't think he's coming expecting to walk into the side. I think he understands that. And look, Arsenal have still got a massive reputation in France. I think, William Saliba moving to the Premier League, moving to play for Arsenal with Aubameyang, Lacazette, it's high profile, and he knows there's going to be pressure. He knows for his career this is a fantastic opportunity. I think he knows he's got to earn his place in the team. I mean, in terms of youngsters, and Kevin's completely right. Of course, these guys play in France and they get the experience, and it's not just that France are good at developing young players and they give them the chance. They have to because they rely on selling players for revenues.
So in France, there are two revenue streams essentially to keep the clubs alive: the TV money and player sales. That's why COVID is also hitting France so badly, because clubs are suddenly not buying all their players. And that brings me on to another thing. We talked about other defenders. The guy that I love is a 19-year-old centre-back from Saint-Etienne, Wesley Fofana, who played quite a lot with Saliba. And there's talk that Saint-Etienne might listen to a €30 million bid for him. Again, it would be perhaps too difficult to have two 19-year-olds learning their trade at the same time in the Premier League. But Fofana, if not this summer, in a year or two, I think he'll be a good Premier League club. He's one of the best young centre-backs in France.
Matt, what kind of personality are we going to see? You know, I think Arsenal fans are loving the Ober-Laka bromance. And I actually was talking on the pod earlier this week about how, for me, Lacazette is our Firmino. He's an unsung hero. He does so much off the ball that people do not appreciate. He's also a game changer and can score a rocket at any minute. Pepe's coming into his own. Ober is who he is, and we know who he is. That front three, for me, I would love to see them have another season together to see what they can do together, regardless of all these other names that are being talked about, you know, about coming in. And what I love about the team spirit right now is that there is one, and that clearly there are really great friendships being built. I love the Arsenal post after the FA Cup saying there's nothing like winning the FA Cup with your best friends and seeing. And it's not that there's cliques, you know, it's not like the Ozil clique that used to be. They're friends, but the team seems so united. What kind of personality is Saliba? You said quiet, but what kind of teammate can the teams expect, and what kind of person can the fans expect outside of all of his God-given talents on the pitch?
I don't think he'll be quiet, certainly on the pitch. I think probably in the first season, he's going to be very much focused on his game, on not making mistakes, on trying to find his feet at Arsenal. You know, we saw him looking pretty shy, didn't we, in the pictures we saw from Wembley of Lacazette teasing him and stuff. And that's understandable, because he's got to get to grips with the language. He doesn't know, looking at all these internationals in the dressing room, and it's a big step for him. So I think it'll take certainly a few months before he starts sort of barking orders at Granit Xhaka or anybody else. But I do see in a year or so that being his role, him being vocal, and yeah, I mean that already was what he was doing as a youth team footballer. He helped Saint-Etienne win the Youth Cup, which is prestigious in France. He only played in sort of the earlier rounds because he then got moved up to the first team squad. But he then got everybody out when they were celebrating after a first team match. So all the fans were in the stadium. And he said, come on, we got to go and support the kids. And he went there and he was leading all the celebrations. He was the same age as them. And he was holding the cup, getting them doing all these dances and stuff. And but then he's doing that when they beat Lyon in the derby, and he's leading the celebrations with experienced Saint-Etienne players. So, no, I think he's a strong personality. I think that's what we need at Arsenal. I think it might take a bit of time to see that, but because, like I say, he's going to be finding his feet. But so
let me ask you guys this, even though we're kind of focused on Saliba here, and KC, I'll start with you and get to Kris. Are you guys? It's always football cyclical. Players come in and out, not like American sports. You could win the Super Bowl one year, and the next year you have a completely different team. Football in Europe, it doesn't work that way as much. But when we're talking about financial challenges, post-COVID, strategic situations and evolutions that the club have to look into, Super Kev, does it concern you about, and we spoke about this on WhatsApp, about William coming in and a potential Coutinho coming in and new characters coming in? To me, it seems like Arteta's building this team in the mold of himself, and that's every great manager does that. We've seen that in Pep. We've seen that in Klopp. The team becomes an image of the manager. It seems like he's looking about character and personality as much as he is talent, Casey.
Yeah, I think that is so important. You got to remember, when he came into the club, we were a mess. Arsenal were a mess, and he inherited that. He had to work out the dressing room very quickly, and he gave players enough rope. He gave Özil enough rope to hang himself. Let's be honest, because he said, I know his talent. He played with Mesut Özil, etc. But the consistency that is required under Arteta is not being adhered to by Mesut Özil, and that's why he's been moved aside. Guendouzi's discipline. He couldn't keep the discipline. That's why he's been moved aside. So the young players have to toe the line. We've seen Ainsley Maitland-Niles pushed aside for a little bit, and then he had to toe the line. He's brought back into the group. So I particularly think Mikel Arteta has to build in his own image, but in his own mindset as well. The players who come in have to have the right mindset. William, I've seen people moaning about, oh, what are we signing William for? William's he's in his prime right now. He's 31 years old. He's flying for Chelsea. He's got double figures this season, and I think he's got nearly double figures in assists. You tack that onto what we do, we finish in the top 4.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for where we finish, Sophie. So again, you add William for nothing, you add Coutinho for a small loan fee, and you've got 2 proven Premier League players who can affect a game in our football club for a little outlay of money. I think that's smart business.
Is Kris and Matt and UKC might correct me if I'm wrong, but Saliba wasn't a Kia it's not a Kia related signing, right? He's not a right. So Kris, does it bother you a little bit, the monopoly that Kia does have on our club, or does it warm you with fuzzies because of his relationship with Don Raul and previously business they've done together? Does it concern you at all in terms of how we're rebuilding?
Not really. Genuinely, I think too many people worry about things that we don't understand and will never be party to. There's no way that every manager gets every player he wants. There's no way that every player is scouted thoroughly and they go for that's the player we want and they get it. There's a lot of the time that deals fall into place purely by the luck of the draw, that they were offered at the right time, that they got deals at the right time, and none more so than look at Carlos Tevez and Javier Mascherano situations. There was no way there wasn't something fishy going on with those two, but they came into West Ham. The rest was history. The thing with Kia is, or the big thing that doesn't concern me is that Mikel Arteta clearly. Well, I say clearly, I don't know. I wasn't in the interview, but I would imagine the first thing that he said when they approached him about the job was, well, 2 questions. 1, why are you coming to me now when you could have had me a year ago and you chose Unai Emery? And 2, if I'm going to take this job, how much power do I have? How much control do I have? And how much do you trust me? He's come in, and in his first season, he's won an FA Cup. Some people say, oh, it's a cup competition. It doesn't mean anything. Most of them are Spurs fans. But he's come in and he's achieved something. He's won something. And that's all the ammunition he needs. He goes to the board and he says, look, this is what I've worked with. This squad that you said, or that the previous manager said was unworkable, I've taken it and I've won something and I've achieved something. The next step to that, the next piece of the puzzle for that is I think, keeping Aubameyang. If you do that as well, you can then go to the board and say, look, yeah, do you know what? These people that are saying, oh, wouldn't sign Coutinho, why? Because he's exactly. He played for Inter Milan, Barcelona, Liverpool, and Bayern Munich. 4 of the, it makes me a bit sick to say it, but 4 of the biggest clubs in world football. And he succeeded at every one. Probably less so at Inter, because I don't think Serie A was really built for his skill set. But particularly at Liverpool, people have got very short memories. I mean, yeah, he did shoot from any angle, any distance, but he's a playmaker. And newsflash, our playmaker is got his feet up at the moment and he's probably not going to play for the club again. And that's the one area that we suffered in. It's like Kev said, you add Willian and you add Coutinho in. I don't care if they're represented by Mickey Mouse, to be honest. As long as they are getting the seal of approval from Arteta and he wants these players, then I back the manager. And it doesn't matter to me. And a year ago, no offense, I'm sure he's a lovely guy and I'm sure he'll play very well for whoever he ends up at. We were being linked with Ryan Fraser. I know who I'd rather have in midfield.
Well, Kris, I just Mickey Mouse has very high commission, so
does makes a lot of money. Makes a lot of money.
And he's a damn good negotiator. He's a damn good negotiator. That
for many years, for many years. But Matt, go on, Matt. Yeah, jump in.
I am a little bit worried, and I know we're being really positive and quite rightly in this pod, but in terms of Kia Joorabchian and how Arsenal do their deals. And the reason I started worrying, I agree, I think Coutinho, Willian are good players. People are maybe wary because we have been stuck with some very high earners. We don't really know what to do. There's, maybe there'll be, if they come, brilliant successes. What worried me was in January, when we weren't just linked, we were very close to signing Layvin Kurzawa, the left back from Paris Saint-Germain, who was coming to the end of his contract. And I was absolutely astounded because Layvin Kurzawa is a talented player, but he's exactly the sort of player that we should not be buying, in my opinion, because he is a guy who plays left back. He's good, decent on the ball. He's quick, but he goes to sleep. He makes errors. He's for me the opposite to Kieran Tierney, who is just totally focused and he's the sort of left back you want in the football club. We were buying Kurzawa because the week before he signed with Joorabchian's business and he's an international left back. But that made me feel very worried because we were trying to get left back. And, he's on huge money at Paris Saint-Germain. So had we bought him, he'd have been on huge money at Arsenal. I just think, it's just a little bit of a... we need to be a bit careful.
So you are concerned. You are concerned about it. Go on, Casey.
Yeah, but we never signed him. You're saying you're worried, but we never signed him. We signed Tierney.
Wow, at the last minute.
Yeah, that's all right. We don't mind. Listen, we can take it. Mickey Mouse is at the head. He's on the wheel. It's all right. Negotiation.
You're doing a podcast.
Yeah.
Under Arsene Wenger and God love him, and to this day I still miss him. And if you're watching us, and you can stay over any time. We'll have a chat. But I think. Are
you offering a place in Plymouth for Mr. Wenger? Yeah. I like that. Yeah.
This time of year, it's not today.
Lovely.
To be fair, but the one thing I think the other situation you look at is when you look at agents and player power, which is what we're essentially talking about here. The agent foisting a player on a club or whatnot. I think if Arsene was still in charge, I think you'd be going into next season not potentially looking at signing Willian and Coutinho. You'd be going into next season going, well, we've got Guendouzi and Özil. Sure, they haven't been very good boys, but we can get the best out of them. We can get it going again. And it's like, now Arteta's come in and gone, okay, there's probably more to Özil than meets the eye. But particularly in Guendouzi's case, he's come in, he's done his research, he saw what happened in the youth team at PSG, he saw what happened in his days at Lorient, and he's looked at it and gone, right, this kid's hugely talented, but he's got a bit of an attitude. Let's see where it ends up. And unfortunately for Guendouzi, it's gone there, and his attitude has ultimately undone him. And the lad he's really not helped himself. But again, in the old regime, I think, agents and the value of the player would have dictated that we'd have kept him, and he'd have probably sat around for another season and we wouldn't have got value from him. This season, it's pretty clear that we want players like that out of the club. And if that means that we can get into bed, if you like, with agents who are going to arguably upgrade those players, then, unfortunately, the modern world is what the modern world is. You kind of have to get into bed with the devil a little bit to find these players and to progress your club. It's not like the days of Jack Walker or whatnot, where you could just sign the best Premier League players and have no strings attached.
I agree. And I just think that's exactly kind of, and if you guys have a few more minutes, I know we said an hour, but do you have a few more minutes to just touch on a couple of other things? Are you cool? Do you have time?
Yeah, good.
Matt, are you good?
Yeah, even before you do, Sophie, I just wanted to say, because you asked me about Saliba's character.
Yes.
We're not getting another Guendouzi now, and I don't want.
That's where I was going. Carry on, Matt.
I liked, and I still do like certain things about Guendouzi, but he's caused problems at Lorient, and now he's got this wonderful opportunity at Arsenal. He's not taking it, and that's his problem. William Saliba is a guy who you said, what happens if he doesn't get in the team? That initially it's not going to be a problem as far as I can tell. Loic Perrin, I've spoken to about him. Absolutely loved him. Gave him to Loic Perrin, veteran Saint-Etienne defender and captain, played alongside him, and he gave him loads of advice. Saliba wanted advice from Loic Perrin. The coach who launched him, Jean-Louis Gasset, who nobody's really heard of because he's this guy who's always been in the shadows. He was France's assistant coach under Laurent Blanc and also at PSG, and he's an amazing coach, but he doesn't want to be number one. And anyway, he was at Saint-Etienne, did an amazing job, and Saliba learned loads from him. And Gasset loved Saliba, and I think he's, in terms of his person, in terms of is he, a good boy in terms of on the training ground in the dressing room, I think there'll be absolutely no problem there.
Matt, you know what it is, and Casey and Chris, I don't know if you agree with me. Guendouzi seems like a punk, and I may be judgmental here, but he just seems like he has a very elevated perception of where he's at right now in his career. Now, I am one of the Arsenal fans that has seen his talent. And I think that with some maturity and more experience, in a few years' time, he could be one that we look back at and say, oh my God, what did we do? Is he going to be another Gnabry? Is he going to be one of those situations where we absolutely regret it? But what I do respect, Casey, and I'll come to you with this first, is that Arteta doesn't care what your name is, what's on the back of the shirt. He's trying to build a squad and he doesn't want any egos. And even though Manchester City had these global superstars, they never seem to be, you know, Kevin De Bruyne seems like the kind of guy you could just go to the pub and have a pint with. You know, I think that's the key here. And for me, I don't feel sad now for losing Guendouzi, but in 5 years, I may look back on it as a huge mistake. You know what I mean, Casey?
Yeah, of course I do. I know what you mean. But the problem is timing. It's all about timing. Guendouzi has proven himself that he cannot toe the line. And when you have a new manager coming into to a football club, and this is what he demands, the fact of the matter is Guendouzi cannot toe the line. He done a bit of toeing the line, and he was playing, and he was doing okay, and then that switch flipped at Brighton, and he made the mistake, and that's what set Arteta off to know, hold on, I'm going to have to discipline this guy. He disciplined him, and then Guendouzi's head fell off. Maybe 5 years down the line,
what happened. We don't know what happened. I mean, apparently he had the fight with Socrates, and we don't know what happened.
Listen, I could tell you what's happened. He's a young player. Any young player who's going to have a fight with one of the experienced players, you are going to lose. You're a young man. You fight an experienced player in that dressing room, you are overstepping your rank. Let me tell you now. So Arteta's probably seen that and wanted to discipline him. He's disciplined him, and Guendouzi's heads fell off. That's what's happened. Because, look, the bottom line of it is this, Sophie. The only way Guendouzi's going to prove that he's a top player is when the penny drops for him, and it will not be at Arsenal. It will be somewhere else. The penny has to drop.
If I were a betting man, I think the penny won't drop, because already he's messed it up at Lorient. Okay, small club, but he was 17, 18, fell out with the coach. He's messed it up at a big club at Arsenal. Right now, he should be feeling very stupid when he looks at what Arsenal did in the Cup against City, in the Cup against Chelsea. When he looks at the way this team is coming together under Arteta, he should be thinking, God, I should be part of that. But I bet you he's not. I bet he's thinking everybody else is fault.
Yeah, you're right, Matt. But again, this is that hard-headedness as a youngster. It's about him. It's about him. It's about him. It's not about we as a collective. The penny will drop. I don't know when it will drop for him, but he will not be at Arsenal. And you know what? Good luck to him, because we can't build with cancers in the dressing room. You can't build anything with rotten apples in the barrel. Trust me.
Which is why, Kris, do you? I know that you and I've talked about Guendouzi. Do you see this as a potential mistake?
Not mistake, no, because I get ribbed all the time on our podcast about, well, if they're French, they've got to be the best player in the world ever, and obviously they are. It's fact, but you can't tolerate it. I mean, it goes. Kev will probably tell you this goes at any level of football you play in, whether it's Sunday League that I've managed a Sunday League team for 5-6 years. If you've got a player who is absolutely world class, you can afford to kind of manage them gently. Righty wasn't a shrinking violet, let's be honest, but you can manage that personality. What you can't have, as Kev said, is a young upstart who comes in and starts making demands and saying, there's, that I deserve this, I deserve that. Matteo came in and unfortunately, he was a victim of his own success in that he got in the team way ahead of schedule. He got as basically a player that we were relying on too much, way too fast, and some of that falls on Unai Emery, to be fair, because I do think he threw him in a lot of pressure on him way too early, sort of a time of his career. Mm-hmm. But as Matt said, there's history here. You know, he leaves PSG under a bit of a cloud. He leaves Lorient under a bit of a cloud. And by the way, Matt, watch your mouth. They're not a small club. But yeah, you know, when you leave two clubs and you leave the biggest club in London under these kind of circumstances, and your team wins the FA Cup and you're posting pictures of your holiday, you're not putting the right image out there. You're not suggesting that you've changed. And I said at the time when all this happened, this was as simple as him going to Arteta, even if it was 3, 4, 5 days later, and going, sorry, Gaffer, I screwed up. You know, even if you don't believe that you're in the wrong, and again, this comes back down all the way down the levels to Sunday League level. You know, we see this happen at all different dressing rooms. Somebody has a flare up, you have a kickabout in training, somebody goes through, somebody, whatever. All you've got to do is be humble enough to say, I'm sorry. And if it doesn't work out and the manager has made his mind up, the buck stops with the manager. He's made his decision. He's given Guendouzi 2, because there was the incident in Dubai as well. He's given him 2 chances. And as much as I like the player, and in terms to your question, will we regret it? We might do. But also, he might end up flickering around, you know, the likes of sort of AC Milan, Inter maybe, and end up back in France and not ultimately get anywhere. And sometimes you've got to take a gamble and get these players out. Some players suit dressing rooms, some players don't.
Yeah, and he does. Yeah, that's going back to he's a punk. Okay, so there only leaves one last thing to kind of really talk about here, and that is when we talk about out with the old, in with the new, and then we've kind of swept some things, Matt, under the carpet over the last few seasons to put band-aids on things. How will Mesut Özil leave this club? What is it going to take for him to leave the club? Clearly, there's no future for him. Arteta does not believe in him. And as we know, Mikel Arteta is very ambitious. Do not be misled by his nice hair and his pleasant presses sometimes, right? He's a teddy bear with a shotgun, in my opinion. And we have to free up that 350 grand a week somehow. And again, I don't blame Mesut for his deal. He took a deal that was offered to him by a club that was on its knees at the time when Alexis Sanchez left. So, Matt, how do we arc this new Arsenal by still having Özil in the dressing room or in the squad?
Well, I've tried talking to my friends at Paris Saint-Germain to see if I could, tempt them to bring him over. One of the only clubs that could afford his salary, but it's really hard, isn't it, Sophie? I mean, and it's been a problem and it's not just now. I think last summer we would have been happy as well. It's got to the point now where he's not even getting picked for the match day squads. And I think we're gonna have to try to do a deal whereby we fund part of his next season. Whether we're paying half his salary or whatever. Ideally, or realistically, rather, a Turkish club that has the money and Mesut might be keen to play in Turkey, because ultimately, well, it depends on how much he wants to play football. And he's only got a few years left in his career, and you would like to think that he wants to play football. He's such a fantastic footballer. I mean, Mesut with a ball at his feet is wonderful, and I think we'd all agree with that. But it's hasn't happened, and he's past his prime for sure. So yeah, that's the only kind of solution that I can see, that one of the big Turkish clubs comes in and we agree to give him 10 million and they pay 10 million, or because he's not. I can understand him not saying I'm going to take a 50% pay cut.
Yeah, it's the same thing with Gareth Bale right now, right? He's been left out of the Real Madrid squad for the next Champions League round, and everyone's arguing about why doesn't he want to play? Well, he's earning $650,000 of pounds or euros, I don't know what it is, a week. Why would he leave when you're earning that kind of money? I think with Özil, it seems like he's more concerned about what he's doing off the pitch than he is on the pitch right now. And so, that's the biggest concern. And when was the last time we really saw him be super productive, Kris, and contribute to the team in an effective way? And some people will say even that, there are still some Özil disciples that think that we could have finished higher up the table if Arteta did play him because we were lacking in creativity. Kris, you first, then KC. Like, what? Özil.
Yeah, I mean, we are lacking in creativity, 100%. But what we're not lacking, in my opinion, is a player who was successful 7 to 8 years ago, when number 10s were still very much the the sort of style of play, formations led themselves to number 10s. I remember watching Mesut Özil at Real Madrid and just thinking, wow, what a player. But that team was built around fast-paced sort of. I think he was a quicker style of player then. His game was a lot more accelerated then, and we bought him to play that role for us, and then we only really played that role with him for 2 years. The game's moved on, and I almost feel I think too many people are very quick to criticize Özil and his conduct, and like exactly what you said there. So, if somebody's paying me an awful lot of money. When basically they only really signed me on that amount of money because they couldn't afford to let me go. I don't think he's doing anything wrong. His attitude in training has been questioned. I'm not at the training ground. I don't know. But if he's not being played and he's basically spending his entire day just getting abuse from fans, and you're going to lose a bit of passion for the game. And I do feel like that's probably what's happened to him. But I just feel that as much as I love him as a footballer, and I just feel like Arsenal need to move on from him. And I feel like he's probably the last piece of that old regime jigsaw that we need to move on from. And if I would have had my way, and it's maybe not a popular view, but I would have moved heaven and high earth to keep Alexis Sanchez when we could have, rather than keeping Mesut, because I feel like he's a player that can still offer that dynamism in that area. But we didn't. We've moved on, and that's where I think the opportunity of a Willian, and more specifically a Coutinho, who can drift wide as well as play centrally. Mesut can't. It's not his game. He's never been a player who can drift wide successfully, in my opinion, especially not in an Arteta style of play.
And Kris is definitely a player that, as you know, I think we all know, benefits from having world-class players around him. Germany, Real Madrid. And KC, we've had the Özil debate for a long time on the pod. He does seem to be that last piece, even though Kolasinac has to go. Mustafi, I think, now is up and down, but I still think he has to go. Chambers has to go. Like, there's a lot of that kind of Wenger era-esque players that still have to kind of be shipped out. El Neni
has to go. Mkhitaryan has to be sold.
He's done. That's done deal now, right? Mickey's done. He's gone. But
I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure yet. Until it's done, until it's done.
How is this Özil thing? Because I think the one thing Arsenal fans would love, whether you love Özil or not, is going into this new season without the Özil debate. It's done. As we said on the pod, I said to you, the fact that Arteta has totally parked him, in the car park, he illustrated that we're done with that. Stop talking about it. And I feel like that was part of the storytelling and the narrative going into the FA Cup. There was less about Özil and it was more about, the future and the team. How's the club going to do this? What's going to happen here?
Sophie, I think what we must understand, and let's look at the facts. Mikel Arteta is our third manager this season. And he's the third manager to park Mesut Özil. Just think about that for a second. That tells you Mesut Özil's desire is not there. Because normally you will connect with one of the three. You would connect with Unai Emery, you would connect with Freddie Ljungberg, and you would connect with Mikel Arteta. They can't all be bad managers because they're all three different characters. So you would connect with one of them. He hasn't connected with one of them. So that tells you his desire is not there. Mesut Özil, it's not his fault. It's just the way. It's about timing. The timing has come that it's Mesut Özil's time now for Arsenal to do a deal and get him out the club. But ultimately, what stops at his door, does he want to play? Because if he wants to play, there is a deal to be done. If he wants to play in Turkey for a big club, like, any of the big clubs, they will pay a certain amount of his wages.
And this, KC.
I forget image rights, because his image is done. It's done.
Marketability-wise, he's made us a lot of money on a global level.
It doesn't matter. We've paid him a lot. It doesn't matter now. The stink that's coming from this situation needs to be gone.
Yeah, that's it. It's just that his presence is wholly negative now. You know, to have him in the dressing room, for people to be asking Arteta questions in every press conference, and even if his attitude is fine in training, he's turning up on time. You know, I don't know, but initially at least, you know, I heard there've been no problems. Whereas Kev says he certainly seems to have lost that sort of hunger, because it's not just a case of losing a bit of pace. He has the ability to be playing a role if he really, really, really wants to. There's no question.
He's also really good at PR, Matt.
It's getting rid of what has become a cloud and a negative presence at the football club.
Yeah, definitely.
100%.
Okay, well, it's been an epic hour and 20 minutes. And I know you guys probably have to go make a cup of tea or a gin and tonic, you know, out there in Europe. My whole day is in front of me. But I do want to get like a final thought, because I'm excited about next season, not because I think we're going to win the Premier League, but I think we might be a little bit more competitive. And I think Arteta brings that to the table as a coach. I don't think there's any, I think every player knows they're under no illusion. You got to show up, you got to train, you got to work hard. If you don't, you're out. And I love that attitude that he's bringing in. Clearly his experience with Pep has helped. I'm going to let Matt have the last word. I'll have Kris have the first word, and then UKC. Kris, we've ended the season on a high. We all know that the Premier League was utter shite, and that we'd like to forget this season. But when you end up with the trophy and a 14th FA Cup, fans have had something to smile about. What are you looking forward to next season, and what are your realistic hopes and aspirations?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It's all about challenging. It's all about being competitive once again. Our name as a club has always been strong. We've always been a club that attracts players, a club that has great history, and is still to this day one of the biggest names in world football. But we need to start performing, and we need to start remembering that, I think, on the pitch, and start showing that. And I think there is a desire now with the way that Arteta's come in, the job that he's done so fast, the fan base, the way it is, you know, we're on the up. I just want us to challenge. I just want us to be competitive. A lot of that will depend upon the signings in and out, and it will be interesting and quite exciting to see what direction Arteta wants to go in. The thing I really like about Mikel is he clearly wants to carve his own niche. He doesn't want to be the new Pep. He doesn't want to be the new anything. He wants to be his own man, and he's taking that his own way, and that's been sort of shown in the games that he's had. So, yeah, competitive. For me, football still isn't going to be what it should be without fans. It's still going to feel a little bit weird, and I'm still not sure that it's going to feel completely normal until that's back. But if we can be competitive, I am always the eternal optimist, but I don't look at any clubs around us other than Liverpool and Man City and say that they're streets ahead. I think those two are. I don't think Man United are. I don't think Chelsea are. I don't think Liverpool, Spurs. Well, I mean, enough said. I genuinely think we should be aiming for third. I really do. I don't see any reason why we can't get back into the Champions League, either, you know, in either third or fourth place. And if we can do that and build on what we've achieved, and keep certain players, then I can see that we'll have a good season.
Awesome. KC?
Well said, Kris. I think I'll just tag on the end of what Kris said. For me, it's the consistency in this team. We know the acquisitions are going to be very key. The re-signing of Aubameyang is going to be key for us as well. Keeping the players at the club who need to stay and getting the players out the club who need to go. That's really going to be important. But, you know, whoever comes in, Arteta's going to have to try and have a pre-season with them and make them competitive, make them consistent. Because competitive is one thing. We've seen Arsenal be competitive sparingly.
It's true.
But what we need is week in, week out to get the same kind of output, as opposed to going from a 9 out of 10 to a 4 out of 10 is no good. We need to be 7s, 8s, 7, 8, 7, 8 with the odd 9 or 10 chucked in, you know, in the mix. That's what we need. And you only get that by adding a better style of player and having a more prepared squad. So that's what I think Mikel Arteta is going to do. And that's what I think is his priority in this break.
Great one. Agree with Kris and Casey. Matt, I'm going to let you have the last word. And thank you again for joining us and giving us your insights. And I want you to tell everyone also where they can find, and Kris, sorry, your podcast and stuff, we'll get to that, where they can find your book and all that jazz, but also what your hopes are for the Arsenal this season. And especially, this is a Saliba special. And we touched on a few other things, but just to go back to him, what your hopes are for the young one.
Yeah, I was thinking about sort of my main hope or expectations. I was going to say that we've got a top class centre back, and seeing a top class defender, something that we almost took for granted for years because we had so many great centre backs. But we really want, we're desperate for one now, and I think William Saliba will be that. And I again don't want to jinx it. New Varane. Well, Kris, I thought the Rio Ferdinand comparison was interesting as well, because that, he's another thing with Saliba is he's very good at not diving in and not doing a Mustafi, and he is a big, strong guy who can tackle, but he stays on his feet. Moving away though from Saliba, what I wanted to say is I'm optimistic. I'm like the rest of the team. I'm optimistic because Mikel Arteta is so impressive, and I think he could be, and I really hope he is, an exceptional manager and is going to leave a massive imprint at Arsenal. And what he's done so far is already amazing. You talked about the culture, changing the culture of the club. That was so necessary. We really needed it. It had been cushy. The players were not being held accountable for stuff. That has all changed. And I think the fact that he's done that without any managerial experience is incredible, because you've got to get the respect of a dressing room. There's no good just going in and going, right, this is how it's going to happen now. The guys won't listen to you. There was skepticism at the beginning. But he's got everybody eating out of his hands. You can see that when he's talking to them at the drinks breaks and what have you. He is so impressive. And I think, yes, I want Aubameyang to stay. Yes, I want a few good signings coming in. But the bigger picture for me is that Arteta is there. And I think we're in really, really good hands.
Amazing. So, Kris, where can everyone, thank you for the loan at Bergkamp Wonderland. Love those guys. They've always been wonderful to me. One of my favorites. Adore them. Kris, tell everyone where they can find you.
So as you said, Bergkamp Wonderland is a podcast I feature on at the AFC podcast. Me individually, I'm at AFC38 on Twitter. And I also host French Football Weekly, which I'm actually about to go and record this week's episode now, where we're going to look back at the slightly underwhelming final of last weekend between PSG and Lyon. So,
I was trying to get you out with 5 minutes to go because I know you have to do that.
That's
so
all right.
Thank
No
you so
worries.
much for coming on, Kris. You're a rock star. Super Kev has his own YouTube channel too. You have to subscribe to it. Go to Kevin Campbell, and he is, of course, at one Kevin Campbell. Anything else you want anyone to know, Casey, or are we good?
Up the Arsenal!
And of course, you can find Matt at Matt Spiro, and then tell everyone where they can find your amazing book, Matt.
So thank you, Sophie. The book is called Sacré Bleu. The full title, Sacré Bleu. From Zidane to Mbappe, a football journey. Very quickly, so I've got a forward by Arsene Wenger. I've got interviews with lots of Gooners, Emmanuel Petit, Robert Pires. I spoke to David Dean. I spoke to Olivier Giroud. I'm missing probably one or two. But if you want to buy it, you can find it on Amazon, of course, or you can support the publishers, a relatively small publishing company called Bite Back. So you can go to Bite Back Publishing's website and you will find Sacré Bleu by Matt Spiro. And that'd be fantastic if you want to buy it.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we are all optimistic about the new season. God bless everyone. Stay safe. And to everyone in chat, including our Gooner girl who just showed up at the last minute. Oh, is it over? Yes, it's over, Amanda.
Typical.
We've done a whole football match. It's 90 minutes. We're almost up here.
It's definitely up. There's no more extra time. Definitely not penalties. Thanks again, guys. Take care. God bless.
Thanks, guys. Cheers, Matt. Cheers.
Thanks a lot.